This is where I think a lot of Christians get this wrong is they focus too much on the curse and the enemy than they do on God and his power and his blessing. I truly believe that God's blessing will far surpass any curse or hex that a song can place on my soul. Some serious conversations you and I need to have. And this is about secular music. There's a difference between secular music and carnal music, what you expose yourself to, what you consume on the daily, podcasts that you listen to, music that you listen to, the people that you listen to. If you're constantly being bombarded by that noise, whatever you are inputting is most likely how your mindset is going to shift. I have always been very deeply drawn to music. If you really think about it, every song in some way, shape, or form is somewhat spiritual. It's sung from the soul. It's your emotions and your experience being put outwards in the form of a song. After probably a year of no secular music whatsoever, I'm finally in a place of my journey and walk with God that if secular music comes on, I know that I'm not going to be heavily influenced by it because my walls are up, because I have a certain level of discernment. Exposure to the music that used to harm me before no longer harms me anymore. Welcome back to another episode of This Feels Holy. And today we're going to be talking about something very serious out there because there's some serious conversations you and I need to have. And this is about secular music. Don't know why I'm taking out all of the accents today, but the topic of secular music is an important one as a Christian. And I think it's something that we need to talk about because it's serious. It is so serious. Okay, I'm going to stop. No, but for real, we need to talk about secular music because I made a video, and I'm going to post this video here, where I essentially shared that I am a Christian. I don't listen to secular music. Also me, and then I have this video of me listening to Yukon by Justin Bieber, his newest song. Now, I wanted to dive into this topic because the amount of, one, support that I got from it, from people who were like, oh, I feel so seen, that was beautiful. I get it because we're human. And thank you for letting me know that that is something that you relate to. For the other half, there was a lot of rebuking. And I also understand that side of the story as well. So I wanted to get into this because this is something that I had struggled with for quite some time, secular music in general, or just worldly music, popular music, just to get a little bit more definitive of what secular music is. Secular music is one that doesn't necessarily have a specific spiritual intention. So it could be, I got a pocket full of sunshine, I know blah, 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 blah. I don't know the full lyrics of that, but it could be that song. That is a secular song technically. But it could also be worldly music. Now, there's a difference between secular music and carnal music. Carnal music is the music that is promoting sin and sexual lust and cheating. So there's a difference, right? Now, I want to preface this by sharing a little story about where I was at with music in the first place. In the beginning, when I first started this journey with God, I realized that, and it wasn't even this journey with God. Honestly, it was at the beginning of just learning about personal development and how important it is to carefully select the input that you receive in your mind. What you expose yourself to, what you consume on the daily, podcasts that you listen to, music that you listen to, the people that you listen to. If you're constantly being bombarded by that noise, whatever you are inputting is most likely how your mindset is going to shift. And so I knew this, right? Because I have a huge background in personal development. It's kind of how I started my entire journey of healing. And then I found God. But I was very selective already with what I was starting to put in my mind. I stopped watching as much movies and TV and instead started reading the things that I found of interest. I started listening to podcasts that were fulfilling and not just full of pop culture and junk. I started to listen to music that didn't promote uh, a lifestyle that wasn't aligned. And I realized just how impactful music could be because in my history, I have always been very deeply drawn to music. It moves my soul like a whole nother level. I feel like I hear beats on a deeper level. There's like bass tones and different musical instruments that I could literally, it feels like my heart flutters to certain sounds. And I have always been one of those girls, like I love to go to the clubs. I used to love going to the clubs only because I really liked the music and I love the surround sound. I love dancing. I love moving my body. And if you really think about it, every song in some way, shape, or form is somewhat spiritual because it's sung from the soul, right? It's sung from an experience that you experience in this world, and it's your emotions and your experience being put outwards in the form of a song. So it's all spiritual in some way, shape, or form. And so I didn't realize the chokehold that hip hop music and rap had in my life. But I grew up in Palmdale, and so in Palmdale, it is kind of a little bit more hood. It's a little bit more ghetto. And I just grew up with that. That was my surrounding. I loved listening to it. And I, in some ways, kind of loved the lifestyle of it. I'm like, oh, like she a bad bee and she gonna get her things. I was drawn to it in some way, shape, or form. That was my history. My history in music was very I was very attached. I would literally like to go to the clubs just so I can dance alone and be in the vibration of that music because I really loved moving my body. I loved moving my body very sexually. I used to go to heels classes because I just loved dance and I loved dance and music. So I knew that this was an area of mine that I was very drawn to. I knew that it had a lot of power and strength in how I operated in my day to day. And so when I started my journey with Christ, I knew that the music I was listening to was not adding up to the way that I had committed myself to Christ. I knew that it wasn't in alignment with the lifestyle. I knew that it wasn't biblical, right? And so cutting off music was probably one of the hardest things that I had to do. And when I did do it, it was like a gradual thing. I had to cut it off slowly and start finding other songs that were more godly, that represented God better, and start replacing those songs. And eventually I got to a point where I hated secular music, where I hated that music because I knew that it was tainting me. I knew that it was diabolical. When you start to realize that something has actually been harming you for a long time, you begin to grow a distaste for it for the sake of not allowing it in your body anymore. So I cut off music completely out of my life. Not music, cut off secular music and only listened to like worship. And then I found out that they're starting to have like a whole bunch of other Christian hip hop and rap and stuff that actually slaps. So now I just listen to that. And I started to notice when I actually cut off all of the secular music, all of the music that was promoting bad behaviors and habits, I started to notice that even my own mood would be lifted. It would be changed. I would start to see myself in a more positive light. I started to have this disgust with the way that the lyrics were put about how degrading a lot of it, of the rap music and the hip hop music is for women. And I started recognizing all these things and I decided that, I needed to go cold turkey if I was going to ever fully cut off secular music in my life. And so after probably a year of no secular music whatsoever, I'm finally in a place of my journey and walk with God and my own ability and discernment that if secular music comes on, I know that I'm not going to be heavily influenced by it because my walls are up, because I have a certain level of discernment, and because I'm always vigilant when this type of stuff happens around me. So the whole point that I'm trying to say is there is a unique journey that we all are specifically on in this walk with Christ. And At one point in my journey, I was super sensitive to music. I knew that it impacted the way that I lived my lifestyle. I knew that it was impacting my mood. I knew that it was impacting the way I thought about myself and other women, relationships, all sorts of different parts of my life were impacted by the lyrics of these songs. And they impacted me very strongly. And so what I had to do in that journey is cut it off completely. But now I'm in a whole different area in my life, a whole new level of my life where exposure to the music that used to harm me before no longer harms me anymore because I'm stronger. It's kind of like if you think about lifting weights, right? At one point, a 5-pound weight was a heavy amount of weight. And the more you continue to expose yourself to heavier weights, soon enough, that 5-pound weight is baby jump change. And now you're lifting 100 easy, right? So where I'm at in my journey and what I think a lot of the Christians who are rebuking me and saying, you need to cut it off completely, none at all, like be unforgiving, you can't allow it at all, but blah, blah, blah. They're like super, super strict about it. It's because they're probably in their journey where they realize that the music is still impacting them very heavily and they are susceptible to the levels of influence that is in that music. Now, I'm aware that some music, especially the carnal music, the ones that are very specifically against God, some people do entire hexes and witchcraft while they make this music. Some of it is very, very dark. The music industry in general, a lot of it is very dark. And I'm aware of this. But this is where I think a lot of Christians get this wrong is they focus too much on the curse and the enemy than they do on God and his power and his blessing. I truly believe that God's blessing will far surpass any curse or hex that a song can place on my soul, right? I could walk into a demonic field, and if I am solidified in my faith, I have a level of discernment, then I know I'm protected by God because God has already won these battles. He doesn't need to win anything more. The only thing that needs to be won is my belief in him. And so when I hear people say like, oh, if you would even expose yourself to a little bit of this music, you're going to, it's a slippery slope and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yo, you need to chill out. I'm like, your heavy rebuking is actually, I get where you're at. Like I used to be in that place. I had to cut it off and heavily have a disgust with that music at one point. But remember that everybody is on their unique journey and walk with Christ. And so when they try to rebuke a baby Christian, right, who is still learning how to start this process of sanctification, it actually turns them away from wanting to continue because it's such a heavy judgmental rebuke that it causes the baby Christians to falter, right? So there's this delicate balance. I get that you can't just like live in fluff and be like, oh, he's all love and light, because I know that there's a lot of conviction and hardships and all sorts of things that happen when you begin on this walk with Christ. But overall, your duty as a Christian, especially if you're further along in your walk, is to remember that everybody has their own unique journey with God. And your job is to not try to force them into transformation, right? Because transformation is God's duty and that's God's power. Your job is to meet them where they are at and help bring them along slowly, but in a way that they can digest it, in a way that is received easily through them, right? It's not your job to convince them to see things from your perspective. It's your job to discern and how to speak to them so that you can meet in between and eventually show them God's true love, which is very accepting and loving at the stage that they are at. I hope I'm getting somewhere with this. I am 8 weeks pregnant. I should have took a nap and I'm breathing heavy, but I'm trying to make a little bit of sense here. I'm simply saying, be mindful of how you rebuke people in their sanctification journey. There is a loving way that you can do it, one where you are asking questions, actually trying to understand why they think that way, having a deeper conversation. That is the way that Jesus would do it. He wants you to actually understand the why, not just shove it down your throat, right? Because when you think about how old Christians used to rebuke people. They used to be like, oh, well, you can't do that because it says so in the Bible. Oh, you can't do that because I said so. Like the way a parent would tell their child, hey, you can't, don't talk back to your parents because I'm your parent, right? Like that's not explaining why. You have to explain the reason why. Well, because I'm your parent, there is a level of respect that your parent deserves, et cetera, et cetera. So all I'm trying to say is that secular music is not all bad. Carnal music, yes, there is a lot of it, but like at the same time, I'm not going to be so fearful of a little bit of music leaking into my ears when I happen to scroll on TikTok. I'm not going to toss my phone at the wall and be like, I'm cursed. Like all of a sudden I'm no longer blessed and I sinned and God's going to punish me. Like I'm not living in fear like that. I have grown into a state of maturity in my faith, maturity in my sanctification. I'm in the space of understanding that I have to be on guard when when I'm absorbing different information, but at the same time, I'm not going to live in fear if that happens to hit my ears. So I hope this was helpful to some of you. For some of you who are in the beginning stages of your sanctification and you're starting to feel convicted about the secular music you're listening to or the music you're listening to in general, just be mindful of it, right? Pay attention to how your body is responding. Ask yourself deeper questions. Am I listening to this and now am I implementing this lifestyle into my life? Am I enjoying it just for a moment and maybe dancing a little bit and then now it's no longer a part of my life? How often are you listening to this secular music? How is it impacting your soul? Like being extremely aware of it and vigilant as you listen is really all you need to do, because at the end of the day, we should not be living in fear of the devil. We should not, because overall, Jesus already won the battle. He already won the battle when he rose from the dead, died on the cross for our sins. We now have the authority to trample over any curse, over every enemy. We've already won if we have Jesus. So living in fear and trying to tell everybody that you can't listen to even a bit of secular music is just wrong. It's inhuman, right? Like we, as holy as we attempt to be, we are still living in a worldly world, right? And so Jesus would often hang out with people who were sinful, but he was never afraid of being cursed, right? And so just a reminder, meet people where they're at. If you are further along in your spiritual journey of your sanctification, then it's your job to meet the baby Christians and meet those who are just getting to know Christ and meet them where they're at. Ask them questions of why they haven't felt conviction in the things that they listen to. Look at the fruit of their spirit. Like how are their characteristics? Do they represent the lifestyle that they're trying to achieve? God speaks to us in so many different ways. God will convict one person of something and then not convict another person of another thing. He might do it for a season for somebody and then never do it for somebody else in a different season. For us to think that we know exactly what God wants from us and how it's all coming about is just ignorance, because that's putting God and how he operates in a box. And you don't want to put God in a box. He cannot be contained in a box. And our thinking, our limited thinking, our human thinking is a box that God cannot be confined in. So for the love of Christ, for reals, stop rebuking people, saying that your way of understanding how to get sanctified, how to love Jesus, how to follow Jesus is the right way, because it's not. You don't know that. We all have the Holy Spirit within us and we feel conviction when and if it's the right time. That's all I want to say. I think this was a little bit of a rant, and yeah, say something, because I'm pregnant and I kind of have an attitude and I really don't care. So I need to take a nap. All right, that's all. I love you. Thanks for tuning in. I feel like my thought processes are not very pure right now, or not fluid at least. They're kind of scatterbrained. But I hope this was a decent episode. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.